Hi, and welcome to the lecture on interactive design, the ideate phase of design thinking. I'm your instructor, Dr. English Dowdell. Now, we're going to dive into a critical part of the design thinking process, the ideate phase. Now, this is the stage where we generate creative solutions for improving how users interact with websites and digital products. Now, by the end of this lecture, you should be able to kind of explain the principles of interaction design, brainstorm and prioritize solutions to improve user interaction, and then kind of understand the steps for designing a basic interactive wireframe for a selected web page. Now, what you want to do is you want to be able to apply these concepts to creating a user flow diagram, maybe for a specific task on your project website if you're working on a website. So, what we're going to go through will kind of help you do that because that will help your users to visualize, how they're going to move through your site in order to complete an action, making it as smooth and as intuitive as possible. So let's start by kind of understanding the foundation of interaction design. Now, interaction design focuses on how users engage with, like I said, a product or a website. The goal is to make these interactions intuitive, seamless, and engaging. And there are five key principles of interaction design, which we call the five dimensions of IXD. The first one is words. And these include labels, buttons, instructions, and any text that guides the user. So, for example, think about the difference between a button labeled submit versus one that might say get started. The wording affects clarity and user motivation. The next one is visual representations. So these are like the icons, the images, and the UI elements that kind of help users to understand actions. So an example would be like that shopping cart icon. It indicates, where to find like your saved items. Then there's the physical objects or space. And this is how users interact with the website using devices like a mouse or a keyboard or touchscreen or voice commands. So an example of this may be swiping left, on a mobile app versus clicking a button on a desktop. And then there's time. This refers to animation, transitions, and feedback loops in a website's interaction. So an example might be, when you hover over a button and it kind of changes color, that's an interaction cue. And then there's behavior, and this is how users respond and interact based on the previous dimensions. So if a form say has too many required fields, a user might abandon it. Good interaction design, makes tasks more efficient and basically like frustration free. Okay, so now that we know these principles, let's apply them to the ideate phase of design thinking. Now, in the ideate phase, we focus on coming up with as many solutions as possible before narrowing them down to the best ones. So here's how we can say brainstorm for interaction design. First step is to identify a user challenge. Okay, so we think about like common pain points when navigating websites. Like for instance, have you ever like clicked a button and then didn't know if it worked because there was no feedback? Or have you ever tried like filling out a form and didn't understand why the input was incorrect? These are interaction challenges that we'll need to solve. Okay. The second step is to generate solutions. So now let's think about potential solutions to fix these problems. Now, there's a lot of different brainstorming techniques that we can use. A few common ones are Crazy Eight, which is basically you're sketching like 8 different ideas in 8 minutes to explore like various solutions. Okay. The next one is mind mapping, where we write down like a central interaction problem, and then we branch out into, like, say, the different solutions. And then there's the SCAMPER method. And this is where we modify like existing designs by substituting, combining, adapting, modifying, putting it to another use, eliminating, or rearranging elements. And I'll provide some links to some of these different types of techniques so you can read a little bit more up on them. And then the third step is to prioritize the best ideas. Now, after brainstorming, you want to evaluate your ideas based on feasibility, usability, and impact. So, feasibility, when we talk about that, it's like, can we realistically implement this interaction within our website's constraints? Usability is, will this solution make navigation easier, say, for our users? Impact would be, will this change significantly improve the user's experience? So this process kind of helps us filter out like weak ideas and then focus on the ones that truly enhance our user engagement. Okay, so now let's move on to designing interactive wireframes. Okay, so once we have our interaction solutions, we need to visualize how they work using an interactive wireframe. So what's an interactive wireframe? So an interactive wireframe is a simple, clickable prototype that shows, how users are going to interact with different elements on the web page. Now, how do we create a basic interactive wireframe? So one is, say we select a website. So we choose a page, say from your project where interaction improvements are needed. Okay. Then we identify key interactions. So we highlight buttons, menus, and form fields that need better interaction. The next step is to sketch the wireframe. So we use tools like Figma or Adobe XD, or even maybe, paper sketches to kind of lay out the design. Then we add the interactive elements. So we show what happens, say, when a user clicks or when they hover or when they scroll. And then last, we test and then iterate. So we get feedback and then we refine the frame, the wireframe, based on the user's need, and we start everything over again as far as the testing. So an effective framework or effective wireframe, I'm sorry, does not have to look that polished, okay? It just needs to really kind of clearly communicate like how a user moves through the site. Now, this leads us to what you're going to be doing for this week if you're watching this lecture as a part of my course. So for the assignment for this lecture, you're going to apply the different principles that we talked about by creating a user flow diagram. Now, your goal is to map out like how a user completes a task on your website. Okay, so basically, let's first talk about what a user flow diagram is. So a user flow diagram, it visually represents the steps a user takes to complete a specific action on a website. So an example could be like logging into an account, making a purchase, submitting a contact form, those type of things. So for your assignment, you're going to choose a task on your project website. So it could be something like signing up for an account, whatever the case is, whatever you want a task for them to complete on your web page or your website. Then you're going to break the process down into clear steps. Okay. Then you're going to draw the user flow using boxes and arrows to show each interaction. Then label the decision points. So if the password isn't correct, then I want you to show an error message. Now you need to ensure clarity because anybody that's looking at your diagram should immediately be able to understand like how the task flows. So by completing this assignment, you'll be able to kind of understand how users navigate through a website. And what this does, it helps us to create more intuitive and engaging interactions. Okay, so today we covered the principles of interaction design, how to brainstorm creative solutions, and talked about designing interactive wireframes to improve user experience. Now, I want you to remember the best interaction designs feels invisible. Users should never have to think too hard about like what they're supposed to do next. You want to make your interactions clear, engaging, and efficient. So I'll provide some various different resources that can help you um, to maybe understand, this topic a little bit more, as well as to complete your assignment if this is part of your course, this lecture is part of your course. Other than that, see you next time. Happy designing.